Imagine this. You're asleep. Deeply, peacefully asleep. And someone shakes you awake at 3 in the morning, drags you out of bed and sits you down at a roulette table. The wheel is already spinning. You didn't ask to play. You didn't even know the casino existed. But now you're here, and the stakes, everything. Your health, your sanity, your capacity to feel pain. You might win big. You might experience moments of joy so profound they justify the game. Or you might lose catastrophically. Chronic illness, heartbreak, trauma that never heals. The wheel keeps spinning whether you like it or not. Now answer me this. Was waking you up a favor? Because that's not just an analogy. That's your life. That's everyone's life. None of us bought a ticket to this game. We were forced into it by biology. By two people who decided consciously or otherwise that our existence was worth the gamble. We emerged from non-existence into a world that immediately began making demands. Hunger, cold, fear, the need to survive in a universe that is, at best, indifferent to our suffering. And here is the question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. What if the greatest harm that can befall a person isn't death, but birth? What if never being born is actually the only way to win? What if existence itself is the original sin, and the peaceful void we came from was the only paradise we'll ever know? Hold that thought, because what I'm about to show you isn't emotional catastrophizing. It's cold, hard logic, and it's been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. This isn't a new idea. In fact, it might be one of the oldest realizations in human history. 2,500 years ago, the Greek tragedian Sophocles wrote something in Oedipus at Colonus that has haunted philosophers ever since. Not to be born is past all prize and best. Think about that. The greatest stroke of luck you could ever have isn't winning the lottery or finding true love. It's never existing in the first place. The ancient Buddhists knew this too. The very first noble truth of Buddhism is dukkha. It's often translated as suffering, but it's deeper than that. It means unsatisfactoriness, friction, the sense that something is always slightly wrong, always just out of reach, always requiring maintenance. Even when you're happy, you know it won't last. Even when you're comfortable, you're aware that discomfort is coming. Life, according to the Buddha, is a condition of perpetual unease. But it was Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century German philosopher, who really crystallized this into a system. Schopenhauer looked at existence and saw something most people refuse to acknowledge, that beneath all of our dreams and ambitions, there is a blind, insatiable force he called the will. Not your personal will, not your conscious desires, but a cosmic evolutionary drive that pushes every living thing to survive, to reproduce, to keep the machinery of life grinding forward without purpose or destination. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Schopenhauer argued that life is essentially a pendulum swinging between two states, pain and boredom. When you want something, you're in pain. The absence creates a void. Hunger, loneliness, ambition, it gnaws at you. So you strive, you work, you chase. And if you're lucky, you get what you want. But what happens then? Does the satisfaction last? Of course not. You adapt. The pleasure evaporates almost instantly, and you're left with nothing. Boredom, a vague restlessness. And so the pendulum swings back. You find a new desire, a new lack, and the cycle begins again. Satisfaction, in Schopenhauer's view, is not a positive state. It's merely the temporary absence of pain. It's a pause between torments. And the only escape from this pendulum is death or, better yet, never having been born in the first place. So we have ancient tragedy, we have Buddhist cosmology, we have German pessimism, all pointing in the same direction. But none of them offered a rigorous logical proof. None of them showed, step by step, why non-existence is objectively superior to existence. That's where we need to meet a man named David Benatar. David Benatar is a South African philosopher, and in 2006, he published a book called Better Never to Have Been. In it, he presented what's become known as the Asymmetry Argument, and it's devastatingly simple. It doesn't rely on feelings or intuitions or cultural pessimism. It's pure logic. A moral equation, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's how it works. Let's start with two uncontroversial facts. First, the presence of pain is bad. No one disputes this. Suffering, agony, misery, these are negatives. Second, the presence of pleasure is good. Joy, love, satisfaction, these are positives. So far, so obvious. But now we need to consider two other scenarios. What about the absence of pain? And what about the absence of pleasure? This is where it gets interesting. The absence of pain is good, even if no one exists to experience that absence. Think about it. If there's a person in agony, and you have the power to prevent their existence, you've done something good. You've eliminated suffering. It doesn't matter that there's no conscious being around to feel relief. So prevention of suffering has intrinsic moral value. But here's the asymmetry. The absence of pleasure is not bad. If a person doesn't exist, they don't miss out on joy. They don't sit in some void feeling deprived. There's no tragedy in the pleasure that never occurs because there's no one to be deprived of it. You don't mourn the fact that hypothetical people on Mars aren't experiencing happiness right now. You don't feel guilt about the countless potential children you didn't conceive last year. Non-existent pleasure isn't a loss. Now, put it all together. In scenario existence, you have both good and bad, pleasure and pain, a mixed outcome. In scenario banana existence, you have the good of absent pain and the neutral non-bad of absent pleasure. That's a purely positive outcome. Therefore, non-existence is on balance better than existence. And here's the moral thunderbolt. Every act of procreation creates a victim. It takes a being that had no needs, no vulnerabilities, no capacity for suffering, and it thrusts them into a condition where harm is inevitable. You can't have a life without pain, but you can have non-existence without pain. The asymmetry is absolute. So if the logic is this airtight, why doesn't everyone see it? Why do people keep having children? Why does the species continue? Because we are not rational creatures. We're animals with a thin veneer of reason stretched over a boiling core of evolutionary programming. And that programming is designed to do one thing: keep the game going. Enter the Pollyanna principle. This is a well-documented cognitive bias. Our brains are wired to emphasize positive experiences and downplay negative ones. We remember the highlights, forget the mundane suffering. We tell ourselves stories where the pain was worth it because the alternative admitting that we're trapped in a losing game is psychologically destabilizing. Then there's hedonic adaptation. When something good happens, we adjust. The new car stops feeling new. Promotion becomes the baseline. The initial thrill of love fades into routine. Positive experiences are fleeting, but the bad stuff sticks. Trauma leaves scars. Chronic pain doesn't just disappear. Grief lingers. Loss is permanent. The asymmetry isn't just logical, it's psychological. We adapt to heaven, we marinate in hell. And yet we keep spinning the wheel. Why? Because evolution doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about replication. Your genes are not your friends. They're parasites that have hijacked your neurology and convinced you that the continuation of the species is somehow meaningful. It isn't. It's just biology playing itself out, generation after generation, with no endpoint and no purpose. Now let's zoom out. Let's talk about the world we're bringing children into right now in the 21st century. Climate collapse is no longer a distant threat. It's a present reality. We're watching ecosystems die in real time. Economic systems are rigged to extract wealth upward, leaving entire generations in debt peonage. Automation and artificial intelligence are poised to render millions of jobs obsolete. Political institutions are crumbling, And existential risks, nuclear war, pandemics, runaway technology loom larger than ever. And into this chaos, people still say, I want to have a baby. I want to bring a new consciousness into being, fully aware that they will inherit this mess, that they will almost certainly experience more anxiety, more precarity, more existential dread than any generation before them. Why? Because of love? No, because of biology, because of social pressure, because of the narcissistic desire to see a little version of yourself toddling around. Let's be brutally honest. When you have a child, you are gambling with someone else's life. You're betting that the good will outweigh the bad, that their joy will justify their suffering. But here's the thing. They never agreed to the bet. They couldn't. They didn't exist. You made a unilateral decision to impose existence on a being that had no say in the matter. And you did it to satisfy your own desires. Legacy, purpose, the fantasy of immortality through DNA. It's not altruism. It's narcissism, dressed up as love. And every parent knows this. Deep down, it's why the question, why did you have me, is so unsettling. Because there's no good answer, not one that holds up under scrutiny. But here's where the story takes a turn. Because anti-natalism isn't nihilism. It isn't misanthropy. Not about hating life or wishing harm on those who exist. It's about recognizing a simple moral truth. The best way to protect someone from suffering is to prevent their existence. It's harm reduction taken to its logical conclusion. This isn't about suicide. Ending a life that already exists is a different moral equation entirely. Existence creates interests. A living person has preferences, attachments, projects. To end that life prematurely is to violate those interests. But to prevent a life from starting, that's pure prevention. It's ensuring that no one will ever have to endure the horrors that consciousness makes possible. Think about it. If you choose not to have children, you guarantee that they will never experience betrayal, never feel the agony of losing someone they love, never lie awake at night, gripped by existential terror, never suffer from disease or depression or despair, will never know cruelty, never be exploited, never die. Not because you saved them, but because you spared them. They remain in the only perfect state available, the state of never having been. The silence of the unborn is not tragic. It is serene. It is the only unblemished condition in a universe that punishes consciousness with entropy and suffering. The lottery ticket remains unbought. The roulette wheel never spins. And the peaceful void, undisturbed, remains exactly as it was. And perhaps that is the most loving legacy of all.